Welcome to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. Coming up next.
This is an important issue from a social justice perspective. Those who are making our policies, in fact, tend to get married at very high rates, and yet they are not espousing the benefits of marriage, which they themselves know and which they themselves benefit from, to those who are struggling financially and would benefit a lot from the commitment and the stability that marriage brings.
Some of you will know that we recently publicised a report from the Centre for Social Justice about the benefits of marriage to society. It's a privilege to welcome across the internet its author, Sophia Warminger. Sophia, say hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
In summary, I think your report found that when parents marry as opposed to cohabit, there are distinct advantages to both the parents, the children and society. I wonder if you can tell us about some of the things that your report found were those distinct advantages.
What we were trying to do is remove this from the kind of personal, impassioned narrative and actually look what are the outcomes for children and for the adults. And one of the main things that we found was that the difference in stability between marriage and cohabitation was quite stark. And then another thing that they found was the number of parental transitions that this was the mother experienced very, very much depending on whether the parent was married or cohabiting. For a cohabiting mother, this was 3 times higher. So 2/3 of children with cohabiting parents had experienced the loss of a parental figure by the time they were 12. And what we know from attachment theory is that that is a huge impact on that child's life, and the loss of that parent is usually the father. Particularly on boys, that has a big effect on their emotional development and their kind of cognitive development as well. 6% of children aged 5 to 10 reported a mental health disorder if they had married parents, and this was double for children who had cohabiting parents. Families on equal poverty levels, those who had married parents were 30 percentage points more likely to have escaped poverty by the time they were adults than those who were from cohabiting parents. So that is a stark difference. And then also affecting what we call externalizing behaviours. So this is things like aggression, hostility, violence. They were a lot more common in children who had cohabiting parents. And actually that study that looked at that and made that conclusion said that family structure, whether your parents are married or cohabiting, had a greater impact on externalizing behaviour outcomes than maternal education level or poverty finance level. So that's quite a strong finding there. And then we also find things like that loss of a parental figure is more likely to result in alcohol consumption, huge ramifications for lots of the government's priorities in terms of criminal justice, in terms of addiction, in terms of housing provision. For example, a study of 60 young people in Croydon, 60 young people who were involved in some way in a criminal incident. 72% of those had a father absence, which was way higher than their peers who were not involved in any kind of criminal activity. And the reason we make this link is, as that we've shown before in the statistics, is that those who experience these things, father absence, parental separation, are much more likely to have come from cohabiting parents because of that stability, which we talked about at the beginning. So all of this shows stability is so important, and the data shows that stability is most commonly found in marriage.
You mentioned a couple of percentages there, Sophia. What does it mean in real life, and how does it change when you go across the demographics, if you like?
Yeah, so that's also particularly why the Centre for Social Justice was so interested in this study. The top 20% of income earners, marriage rates are by and large staying at a very high level. 84% of those in the top quintile who are parents are married. Unfortunately, only 45% of those in the bottom 20% of income are married. This shows that all of the benefits that we've spoken about that are accrued from this commitment and this stability, the top quintile, which ironically will include most of our politicians and policymakers, they are still getting married at very, very high rates. They know something about the inherent value and consequence of that stability crystallised in marriage. And unfortunately, those who would benefit most from those consequences and those benefits in the lower income are not getting married at the same rates. In fact, their marriage rates are declining. This is an important issue from a social justice perspective. Those who are making our policies, in fact, tend to get married at very high rates, and yet they are not espousing the benefits of marriage, which they themselves know and which they themselves benefit from, to those who are struggling financially and would benefit a lot from the commitment and the stability that marriage brings. Outcomes for adults who get married, mothers are a lot less likely to experience postnatal depression, psychological distress, conflict with their children is a lot lower. Health outcomes for men, 46% less likely to have a cardiovascular ill health. Married individuals are more likely to get involved in a community organisation, be members of a voluntary association, be more kind of community minded as well. So all of these factors are really interesting. And yeah, it's not just children who benefit, it's also those in the marriage relationship themselves.
So your report would imply that when parents get married as opposed to cohabit, it's clearly better on just about every scale you could imagine.
I would agree, and I think the data would agree, most importantly. And even when you controlled for income and education level, these differences still persist.
Tell us a bit more about how marriage improves income levels.
In fact, something that we found was those who start at the same income level, same education level, those that are married have a faster trajectory of earning more.
What do you think is special? What separates marriage from cohabitation? Where's the difference, in essence, do you think?
So I think one of the main things that makes marriage different is that it is a very specific moment of articulated commitment. And therefore, the fact that you're standing up publicly in front of family and friends, making those promises, making those vows, it pushes out into the open ambiguity in a way that is very helpful. The unique thing about marriage is it forces you to have that forever conversation. And I think the legal aspect is really important as well. The fact that the state recognises you as a unit that is pulled together, that is committed publicly, that you will be with one another for life. If you are with that kind of 50, 60-year vision, then you are more likely to make sacrifices in the short term for the long-term gain. Whereas in a cohabiting relationship, maybe you're not sure if they'll be around in 10 years.
So how important is statistics and data to this whole discussion, Sophia?
The main ask of the report, it was more data-based rather than policy-based, so it wasn't particularly making a strong policy recommendation, but the one thing, if it was asking for anything, was just clarity in its data collection. I think there's a danger that the government sees marriage and cohabitation as interchangeable relationships. So therefore, in its data collection, in census, in the way that it analyses families and families' outcomes, it lumps them together as if they were the same type of relationship. And I think this report has shown that that is not true. So I think it's really important that when we're collecting data and analysing children's outcomes, we make this distinction between parents that are married and parents that are cohabiting and recognise them as separate relationships. And I think also something that could be really beneficial is just honesty from politicians who, as I said, still get married themselves in very high rate, and making the case that marriage has different outcomes from cohabitation.
Is there anything else your report asked the government to do? What might governments do in order to promote and support this clearly wonderful institution of marriage?
One of the best ways to change people's behaviour is tax. Money has an amazing ability to nudge people's behaviour. I think the government could well expand that. I think it would be very beneficial for couples if they wanted to be able to be taxed as a couple. And just finishing on that, one very practical thing, this is not a government ask, but one thing that I thought that was brilliant was I saw a church, I think in Hertford, was offering a package wedding for £1,000 for 30 guests. And I think there's a lot to be said about reducing the cost of the actual wedding ceremony. I think we know that the marriage is what's important. It's the day-to-day commitment that's what's important. The government are wary of intervening in personal lives, but we're not advocating for heavy state intervention at all. We're just advocating for them to lay out the facts and the statistics as they are, and to let people look at that and therefore make an informed choice. The point at the moment is that a lot of people don't know, and they really think that these relationships are interchangeable. And I think the government and culture and individuals have a responsibility to make sure that that choice that people make about their relationship is informed, and is informed on real statistics, not just a version of what they think is true.
Well, I think that might be a good point to end on, Sophia. Can I thank you so much for your time, not only in writing the report itself, but for coming here today, of course, and telling us about some of the key points from it.
Thanks so much, Tony. Really great to chat.
Those of you interested in a link to the report, you'll find one in the description to this video. Also, if you'd like to contribute to the work of Coalition for Marriage in supporting and promoting marriage, you'll find a link in the description also.